It's so good to see everybody, even though this is not how I'm used to seeing you guys. And, I'm used to seeing waving and hugging on my little friends, but here we are. um, but it's so good to see you guys, and I'm glad that you all can make it tonight. So Dr. Brockman will be speaking to us tonight, which is awesome, since she is newer into our department, but she's still super awesome. So just a quick thing tonight. I know that this is not an easy time for any of us to be going through, especially as seniors. Student teaching is not student teaching as much anymore. It's just a lot of different things going on. But I know that God has a plan for us, and that whatever he has planned for us is better than what we could have planned for ourselves. So just keep that in mind as we go through this time. I'll say a quick prayer, then I'll let Dr. Brockman go ahead and get started. Dear Lord, thank you for this day that you've given us. Thank you for this time that we have together to learn more about what you have called us to do. I thank you for all the people who are here and all those who cannot make it, and all that you are doing for them in their lives. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Amanda, you were going to make a few announcements. You want to do that at the end?
I'll do that right now, actually. Thank you for reminding me. All right, so Tell Banquet has been canceled. I know some of us know that already, but we're talking about, I know Dr. Rawl said something about postponing it on the phone earlier, but right now it's just canceled. We don't have any other plans for it right now. And then the other Tell meetings, we're not sure if we're going to continue on doing more of those. We'll see how tonight goes. And if you all have any more like recommendations or anything that we could do to make this go better, anything like that, just let me know. Dr. Ryle know, any of us know. And then for future elections for the officers, we're just going to probably end up waiting until the fall to do that for our upcoming Tell cabinet. But if you have any questions, any concerns, anything like that, just send me an email or send Dr. Ryle an email and we'll take care of it.
All right. Am I good to start?
You are awesome. Get ready to start.
Okay. All right. So, like Amanda said, my name is Kim Brockman. I'm new to Asbury this year. I'm delighted to talk with you about behavior intervention tonight. So what I have planned is about just 45 minutes to talk with you about some behaviors that you might encounter that are a little more significant than would be typically addressed and handled through your regular classroom management plan. And then we'll have about 15 minutes for questions. And so I hope this is beneficial to you as you start your career as teachers. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll go through a PowerPoint that kind of summarizes the what I have. And so feel free as we go through to type questions in the chat box, but we'll get to those at the end, if that's all right with everyone. So we're going to talk about behavior tonight. And the reason we're talking about behavior is because in all likelihood, you will, during your teaching career, encounter some students who will try you, who will exhibit behaviors that will frustrate you. And so we want you just to be prepared. This is not meant to alarm you. This is meant to equip you. And so as we start off, oh, let me do a slideshow. It'd be better. That'd be better. So when you talk about challenging behaviors, know this. Having behavioral issues in the classroom is the #1 reason that you might not get your content fully covered. If you are addressing behavior and that is taking away from the time that you're able to commit to your class and instruction, you won't get through your content. That's a significant issue. It is the #1 reason that teachers feel stressed. And so know that going in, anything you can do to prepare yourself so that you can more adequately, sufficiently address those needs will lower your stress. That's important for you. That will give you balance. It is the #1 reason teachers leave their profession. We desperately need good teachers. And knowing that challenging significant behaviors in the classroom leads to good people leaving their profession is a cause for concern. So again, tonight is meant to help equip you. So I'll tell you that I spent many years as a school psychologist. Fun fact, when Dr. Crook was principal at Northside Elementary School, I was school psychologist in his building for 1 year. Found him to be incredibly student-centered, just an incredible leader. And so I was a school psychologist for a number of years in Minnesota, Woodford County, and Jessamine County. I was assistant principal at East Jessamine Middle School and West Jessamine Middle School. I did discipline from the time I got to school to the time I left for a number of years. And then I finished my career principal at Warner Elementary School in Jessamine County. So the last 5 years I was a principal in elementary school. In every role, I spent significant amounts of my time dealing with behavior and discipline. So anytime I do a presentation on behavior, I start with this quote because I find it just to be the perfect metaphor. And it is from Abraham Maslow, and it is, if the only tool you have is a hammer, you will treat everything like a nail. When it comes to behavior, having a repertoire of strategies to apply, to use, to implement, that's what you can do. That's how you can prepare. That's what you have in your arsenal, or a variety of strategies. So tonight is meant to give you some background information and hopefully give you some tools in your tool belt. I am famous at Warner for taking a metaphor like this and then just absolutely running it into the ground. And I'll do that tonight. So we're going to talk about this in the framework of the pyramid that I'm sure you have seen in terms of academic interventions. And so I pulled this graphic up because you see the academic response to intervention model on the left, and you see the same model on for behavior on the right. So in most schools now, they are looking at positive behavioral intervention systems, or PBIS, and they are looking at behavior in the same way they're looking at academics. There are those students at the bottom, 80 to 90%, for whom your classroom management system will be sufficient. For 80 to 90% of your students, that's all they'll ever need to have appropriate behavior in your classroom. However, there are going to be about 5 to 15% of students who need Tier 2 support. And that's that next level of support. And that might look like some small groups for students, maybe some individualized reteaching, but there are going to be about 5 to 15% of the students who need a little bit more to consistently have appropriate behavior in the classroom. Those are your at-risk students. And then there's the tip top, and that's the 1 to 5% of students who have significant behavioral issues. And those students need individualized plan, individualized assessment. They need teams of people working with them. And so you can see that the behavioral systems RTI model parallels the academic system. And so just another way to look at that specifically for behavior, that bottom tier are your primary prevention things that you do within your classroom for everyone. Next are some specialized groups for your at-risk students. And then at the top are your very specialized, individualized systems, and those are high-risk students. So we'll talk about it within that framework. So Tier 1, those are your basic tools. You must have your hammer and your screwdriver and your pliers. You must have your basic tools. And I know that you have a class in classroom management that is very well taught. But if you don't have this solid foundation, it makes everything else more difficult. So for Tier 1, make sure your work is engaging and kids can access it. So that might mean you need to scaffold. You're going to establish and teach clear expectations, and you're going to reteach them when you come back from a break. You're going to establish a sense of community in your classroom, because we know that when students feel safe and respected and when they trust their teacher, you have a great community and learning can thrive. You're going to establish and maintain positive parent relationships. You're going to know your students, and you're going to recognize and reward appropriate behavior. Those are your basics. You need those on Tier 1. If you have those well established, makes everything else easier. But we're not going to spend a lot of time on that because we're going to talk about the more significant behaviors. So Tier 2. These are your power tools. And yes, we went straight from a hammer and a screwdriver to a drill and a circular saw. Power tools are intimidating, but you must know how to use them. So Tier 2, these are the students who need those power tools, who need those more advanced skills and strategies. These are your at-risk students. And so some of the behaviors that I typically think of in terms of students in Tier 2 are those students who are disruptive. Those are the students who are calling out. Those are the students who are up out of their seats and they're just making noises. They are disrupting your instruction. You cannot continue instruction because they're disrupting you. There are students who are non-compliant. I'm going to make a distinction between non-compliance and defiance. So non-compliant is you tell them to do something, and they just don't do it. They might not talk back to you. They might not make a big scene about it, but they just don't do it. These are students who are verbally aggressive. So these are students who might be doing some bullying, who might be doing some name calling, who might be, but these are not students who are threatening. Threatening moves up to tier 3. So, but they're verbally aggressive. And these are students who are disrespectful, and they may talk back, and they may argue with you. So your tier 2 students interrupt your instruction through many of these behaviors. These are the ones that I most encountered. So some considerations when you're looking at things to do for students who are in tier 2. It's incredibly important that you determine why they're doing what they're doing. If not, you could inadvertently put in place an intervention that actually encourages the behavior. So for instance, if you have a student who has poor writing skills and does not enjoy writing at all, and the function of their behavior of maybe being out of their seat and interrupting other students, and so being disruptive in the classroom is to avoid the work. If you give that student a lap around the school to kind of get themselves back together, get their self-control back together, and get ready to work, you have just applied an intervention that actually is going to increase the behavior. They wanted to avoid the work. You have implemented an intervention that allows them to avoid the work. So you're going to see an increase in that behavior. So you have to know why they're doing what they're doing. Some of the most common ones are to escape, to avoid work, to get your attention or to get the attention of peers, and for control. If you think about students who have trauma, students who are in foster care, students who have abusive homes, them wanting to have control over their environment can be a really powerful function. So you're going to need to determine what the function is. You have to know the background of your students. You have to know what their strengths are. You have to know what their challenges are. You have to know if they have trauma. You have to know their interests. It's essential to know the student. You're going to have to develop a plan that addresses the function of the behavior. So if the function of the behavior is control, you're going to give them choice. And you're going to give them choice when and where you can so that they feel like they have control. But you're going to develop a plan that specifically addresses the function of the behavior. When you can embed your plan into your current classroom management system, that's the best. And so if you're using a clip system and can just give them more chances before they clip down, or more opportunities to clip up, if you can use your current system and just embed it in that, that's the best. You're going to involve parents. It's critical for tier 2 students. They're at risk. It's critical to involve the parents and have everyone working together. And then you're going to consider interventions as opposed to consequences. And what I mean by that is that sometimes we want to allow students to do things, to have opportunities when their behavior is good. And so, but sometimes you just need to put the opportunity in place. Like if they have a classroom job, you don't make that classroom job contingent upon them having a good day. They need the classroom job. That's the intervention. And so you don't make it contingent on their behavior. You just offer that. If they need scheduled breaks, give them scheduled breaks. Say, here are the times for your breaks. Other times you may need to say, you get this much work done and then you can have a break. But if they need something to be able to have appropriate behavior in the classroom, give it to them. It should be an opportunity, not just a reward all the time. As the classroom teacher, if you can provide the consequences, you should do it. You may always write office referrals, behavior referrals when they are appropriate, but you do not want to give up your control. You do not want to give up the opportunity for you to be the one to decide unless it's necessary. The sooner you give up that control, the less authority you have in the classroom. So I would encourage you to use consequences that you have control over whenever possible. So some tier 2 interventions, some things you might use for that student who is disruptive or disrespectful. You can do small groups. They can be social skills group, counseling groups, self-control groups. Check and Connect has become really popular as a way to provide some support for students. And that is a check-in in the morning and a connection in the afternoon. So in the morning, someone who has a good relationship with the student goes to the classroom, pulls the student out into the hallway and says, remember, these are the things you're working on today. I know you can do it. I'll see you at the end of the day. I'll hear how your day went. So you just remind them of the expectations, tell them you care about them, tell them you're going to check on them, and then you go back at the end of the day and you say, how was your day? What went well? Why did it go well? What didn't go so well? Why didn't it go so well? What can we do tomorrow? So Check and Connects have become really popular as a way to help students in tier 2. And so if you hear that phrase, know that that's what it is, and think about some of your students who need that. You can write contracts with students. You can have individual behavior plans in tier 2. You can do team plans if you're at the middle school. Mentoring is another intervention that has really gained in terms of being valuable, being seen as being valuable for students. And so assigning students a mentor, if you have those available, it's a great way for a student to learn appropriate behavior and just to have some positive interactions with adults. So mentoring has become extremely popular for students. When I was at Warner, we had a partnership with Southland. They provided mentors. We also worked with the high school. Some high school students who were leaders at the high school came down and mentored our students. And then we worked with the sheriff's department. So you can pull in mentors from a variety of places. You do need parent permission, of course, to provide those. You can do daily notes home. You can have scheduled breaks. You can give students a classroom job or responsibility. Whenever possible, with tier 2, use natural consequences. And so if they have wasted your time in the classroom, you can hold them back for 1 to 2 minutes after the bell rings if you're in the middle school, which may not seem like a long time, but really is quite a long time when they're missing that time in the hallway. I used to, if students were disrespectful to our community, I'd make them give back to the community. So with parent permission, I might have them do some cleaning, some taking care of the building. Tier 3. So you used your power tools in tier 2. In tier 3, you need a construction crew. In tier 3, it is never just you, the classroom teacher. It is a group of people, each one of whom has particular skill set that they bring to the table, particular strengths, a particular perspective. These are your high-risk students. I will say that every year, you're going to have 1 or 2 students who are in tier 2. That's what I would guess. In tier 3, you might go a year or 2 without a student in tier 3. Across your career, do I believe you'll have at least a student in tier 3? I do, but that might not be. That absolutely might not be. So know that this is the exception. This is not the rule, but also know that this is becoming increasingly common, that we have students with significant mental health issues coming from residential placements, coming into foster home placements. And so know that this is a possibility, and know that if you have a student who's in tier 3, it will not be just you. These are high-risk students. What you're going to see here is defiance. This is not just not doing what you say. This is in your face telling you they're not going to do it. These are students who are physically aggressive. They could be aggressive toward you. They could be aggressive toward peers. They could be destructive in the classroom. But these are students who are physically aggressive. These are students who threaten, and these are students who run away. Of all the behaviors, the hardest one for me ever to deal with was running away. Because when a student runs away, it's a significant safety issue, but it can quickly become a game if you're chasing a student. And so running away is particularly difficult. So all of these behaviors and all the behaviors in tier 2, your goal is to come up with a proactive plan so you decrease these behaviors, because once you have to deal with them, it's very, very hard. So some considerations for Tier 3. I said this before. This will involve a multidisciplinary team, and maybe not just school people, in all likelihood, not just school people. You might have additional agencies and support persons, so you might be working with another agency like Impact. You might be working with a counselor or a therapist. You might be working with a medical doctor where you're collaborating with them on medication. You might be working with people in the with social services. So there are a variety of people that with whom you might be consulting in Tier 3. If you have a student who's physically aggressive towards peers or toward you, you might need to know how to clear your classroom, and you might need to practice that, because one of your responsibilities will be to keep the other students safe. And so if you have a student who is very aggressive and destroying things in your classroom, you'll need to know how to clear that classroom. And you'll need to consider maybe training in safe physical management. That's a certification that you're certainly not required to obtain. But if you have a student and you feel like at some point they might need to be physically restrained and you want to be able to do that yourself, you might consider that training. Again, you will have people in your building who have that training. You will have a crisis team in your building because everyone's required to. And so you may not need to do that, but just know that if you feel like those are skills that you need, then that training is available. And so with Tier 3 considerations, you're looking at really significant behaviors. And so you're going to be looking at some safety issues. Another person with Tier 3 that you might work with if you're secondary is your school resource officer. They were certainly critical partners for me in the middle school, and I know have been at the high school too. And so when you're looking at Tier 3, you are looking at some significant safety issues. And so be prepared for that. So some Tier 3 interventions. You will always be looking at an individual behavior plan if they're in Tier 3. You will have assessment data, and you will base some of your decisions on that. These students may or may not be identified as students who have a disability. Some of these students have an emotional or behavioral disability. Some do not. But you will definitely have an individual behavior plan, either as part of their IEP or just a standalone behavior plan. A lot of buildings now have PASS programs, and those are teachers who provide the support for those students who have significant behavioral issues. So the PASS program, the goal of it is to keep students in the classroom but have an immediate response when students have some behavioral issues. So the way that the PASS program works in many schools, the way it worked at my school, is if you have a student who's in the PASS program, you have some way to signal red, yellow, green on your door or just outside your door. The PASS teacher and an instructional assistant make constant rotations through your school. If the student who is in the PASS program starts to have some behavioral issues, you move the color coding system from green to yellow. If the PASS teacher goes by and sees that it's on yellow, they're going to hang out at your room for a little bit, just make sure everything's okay. If the student corrects their behavior, they move it back to green. All is good. If the student does not correct the behavior or it escalates, then they move it to red. Once the student's on red, the PASS teacher comes in and pulls the student out and talks with them about how to fix the behavior, may take them out of the room for a little bit. But the goal of it is to have those students who have significant behaviors have immediate services, but to keep them in the classroom. Highly structured programs, also those classes just for students who have significant behavioral issues. Again, maybe students with disabilities, but may also be students who are not identified as having a disability. And so sometimes schools have those classrooms. There's a significant process to get a student into one of those rooms because it's restrictive, but they're available. Many of those students will have individual counseling. Some cautions. You've got to avoid power struggles. If a student tells you that you cannot make them do something, what I want you to know is they're right. You can't make a student do anything. Give it up. Don't even try. Just know it. They say you can't make me, they are right. You cannot make a student do anything. So do not get into a power struggle with a student. You can develop a plan that provides for the function of the behavior in a more appropriate way. You can reward them when they make the right choice. You can consequence them for not making a good choice, but you cannot make a student do anything. So just know that. Don't ever address behavior of an individual in front of peers. I made that mistake in the cafeteria at the lunchroom table. It did not turn out well for me. So don't ever address behaviors with students. It's respectful to pull them out, and you're going to be more successful, because as long as they're in front of peers, they have an audience. That's not good. Don't put your hands on a student unless there's imminent danger. That's if, and this is if you've had safe physical management. And so don't put your hands on a student unless there's imminent danger. Don't block the door. If you have an escalated student and you block the door, you are inviting contact. Don't do it. The only reason you'd do it is if you had a little bitty guy, maybe a little buddy in kindergarten, and you thought if he gets out of this room, it's dangerous to himself. Then you might block the door. Other than that, don't do it. Know the significance of isolation. Safe physical management is physical restraint. Seclusion is putting someone in a safe room. What I want you to know is that putting someone in a safe room is seen as more significant than putting your hands on a student. Isolation, seclusion is seen as very significant intervention. And when you have a student who has big behavior in your classroom, parents are going to know about it. There's going to be talk about it. You have to maintain confidentiality of that student. A parent may mention a name. A parent may talk about students. You have to maintain confidentiality of that student. So let's talk about some behavior plans, kind of watching my time. So let's talk about some behavior plans that might, we talked about some of these interventions you can use. So I'm just going to give you some examples, and hopefully these will be tools that you can use moving forward. This is a little plan. This is a tier 2 plan. It is easy, but it is effective. I will tell you that, like, as we go through these plans, you all, nothing that I've ever done has worked all the time. And even a really good plan probably is only going to work 6 to 8 weeks max. And so just know that. Just be flexible. Just try different things. Here's an easy plan for a student who's not following your expectations that I know is effective, because I have had teachers come back and tell me, hey, that worked. So it's the Post-it note plan. So if you have a student who's let's say they're calling out, and so you put a little Post-it on their desk, and the desk says, I will raise my hand when I need something. So you always want to state it positively. You're always going to tell the student what you want them to do, not what you don't want them to do. So you put that Post-it there. You say you're going to raise your hand. And then when they raise your hand, you go over and you make a little mark and you say, thank you for raising your hand, or whatever the behavior is. And it's important to tell them why they're receiving it. That goes back to being clear about your expectation. That is an easy plan. That is an effective plan for some students. So it does not have to be, if a little plan works, use a little plan. Only use the big plans if you need the big plans. Little plan's sufficient. Stay right there. Contract. This is particularly effective with middle school students. If any of you are secondary, and I don't have much high school experience, but I would imagine this would also be effective and age appropriate for high schoolers. You're going to develop a contract, and it is exactly what it sounds like. You're going to say, this is what you're going to do, this is what you're not going to do, this is what's going to happen if you do it, if you're successful, this is what's going to happen if you're not successful. When I, at the end of the school year, 8th graders and 5th graders have lots of trouble because they're just too big for the current school and their rules. And so for our 8th graders, we did contracts and we listed out all the incentives that they could potentially lose, and each student signed a contract. And it was successful because it was clear and it helped those students who were kind of on the edge of making good or not so good decisions. Contracts are effective. I started to put in examples of contract, but I thought this was better. If you Google behavior contracts for students, you get all of this, and it's organized elementary, middle, and high. So if you're looking for contracts, tons of examples on the internet. Daily monitoring sheets. These are helpful. I know these to be helpful in elementary school. I know middle school students don't like these, but they can be effective for middle school students. If for no other reason, then you put it in place with the idea that when you're successful, you won't do it anymore. So this, you're going to determine your behaviors you want to see. You're going to state them positively. You will never have any more than 3 behaviors because that's too many for any student to keep up with. You establish a goal, and then you're going to identify incentives when they meet the goal. And so if you have good baseline data, that'll help you drive your goal. If not, you want to make sure your student is successful. If you Google monitoring sheets, you will get a whole bunch of examples of these as well. You can look at them, you can develop your own, you can break it down by content, by times of the day, and these cost, so you can always just look at these and then make your own. They are not hard to make, but lots of examples on the internet. Oh, whoops. So a classroom lottery, if you are working on a particular behavior in your classroom, if you want to increase the number of students who do their homework, who come in with their homework done, then you just give them a ticket when they bring their homework in. And at the end of the week, you do a drawing. Fun, easy, kids like it, kids of all ages like it. Marbles in a jar. This could also be pieces of candy. This can be used for a class or for an individual. Again, you identify behaviors you want to see. Do you see that that's kind of the first step in all of these? You're clear about what you want to see. Then you're going to place a marble or some other concrete object in a container when you see it. Should be visible. And then when you get to the number of marbles that you have established as your goal, then there's an incentive. Then there's a reward. Response cost. Write extra recess on the board. And if you're working on talking out while you're doing instruction, every time somebody talks out, you simply go to the board and erase a letter. At the time for recess, if there are any letters left, they get extra time at recess. Easy. It's effective. Kids will monitor one another because they want this. For middle schoolers, you can do social time and give them 5 to 10 minutes to talk at the end of class. So easily adapted for middle schoolers too. Just use social time because middle schoolers do enjoy talking with one another. So when you're thinking about behavior plans, you have to have a positive component. They cannot just be negative. They cannot just be consequence-based. You have to have a positive component. You're going to set your schedule determined by the severity of the behavior and the characteristics of the student. I've had students who needed to be reinforced at the end of every class. I've had students who could go all week with working toward an incentive. So it's the severity of the behavior and it's the student. Reinforcement schedules the same way. And always include the student when developing the plan. Even very young students can contribute to this. And then make sure the student experiences success. The plan will not work if you set a goal so high that the student's not successful. For reinforcers, William Jensen talks about mystery motivators. They are big fun. So if you have a classroom goal and you want to get to a percentage of students who have accomplished a task or who have met a behavioral goal, you simply put whatever your motivator is, whatever your incentive is, in an envelope, just a piece of paper that says what it is. So maybe it's a sucker, and you just write on a piece of paper, sucker, and then you put that in an envelope, and then you write on the envelope, mystery motivator, and you decorate it and you put it up on your board so everyone can see it. And you say, remember, we're all working for our mystery motivator. We don't know what it is, but we'll get it. It just builds suspense and helps kids stay motivated. You can do music during work time. You can buy spinners and wheels and have kids spin those to see what their reinforcer is. If you're in middle school, you can do hat day. If you're working with elementary students, well, middle schoolers too. I did this with middle schoolers too. A lot of times for their reinforcement, I would let them pick a friend and then play a game together in my office on Friday. This did a few things. One, it was incredibly reinforcing because kids like time with their friends. But it also built social skills. I was there to facilitate the time. And so using social reinforcers like games with a friend can serve two purposes. And then think about having a menu. of reinforcers, and the student gets to pick. And so you sit down with the student and they identify several things that might reinforce them. In the beginning of the day, then you say, what are you working for today? Are you working for some Skittles? Are you working for time with a friend? Are you working with computer time? What are you working for today? But a menu kind of keeps it fresh and new. So we talked about like how very difficult it is. We talked about the challenges of this. And so the question then becomes, why do you stay the course? Why do you do this work when it's frustrating and when it's so hard? And that is because we're building for God. We're building citizens for the kingdom of God. And Ephesians says, you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with God's people and also members of his household, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets with Christ Jesus himself as the chief cornerstone. In him, the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord. And in him, you too are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit. So your work is so meaningful. You impact the lives of children, sometimes eternally. And so it's important work. It's meaningful work. You are building citizens for the kingdom of God. So that's what I have for you tonight. And I think I talked quickly. But let's see if you have questions or if you have comments or if I can give you any more guidance.
All right. So let's everybody thank Dr. Brockman. Let's do our little.
Yay!
Thank you. I hope it was helpful. I hope it was beneficial.
It was
All
great.
right. So again, Tell Banquet is postponed, canceled, whatever as of right now. And then if you have any more concerns or anything about how we should go on with Tell for the rest of the year, please just let us know, because if they, if you all want to continue to do this, this is fine with me. I'm sure this is probably fine with Dr. Ryle. We would just have to make sure that we've got everything prepared for it. But as far as everything goes, I think that's it for tonight. Like I said, if you've got any questions or concerns, please just email Dr. Ryle or I or Dr. Rhodes. All right. Thanks, guys, so much. Have a good night.